morning. Good morning. Let's sit together for a while and see if a few more people join us on the screen.
We're all here.
The physicals are here.
And all the physicals are
Good.
here.
Now let's see if we can get them really here. We have a bit of an age range here, and I'll just point out to you that when we're younger, it kind of makes sense that we're kind of rushing around trying to do things, because there's this great unknown future in front of us, and we need to kind of bring it into being and manipulate it and do things with it and become rich and famous with it, etc., etc. Right? But when we get older, we start to realize that what's in front of us is death. And we go, well, why am I in such a hurry? So it may be that a kind of a natural slowing down might happen. That you might, we're busy in meditation, we're saying, oh, be in the here and now. And the young minds are going, what do you mean here and now? It's tomorrow, it's next week, it's, right? And, when we're kind of old geezers and we say, well, tomorrow actually is the end game, then you go, well, maybe I'll just really fully enjoy what's going on right now. Right? Forget it. You haven't got time for practice. Right? Practice of Dharma is for youngsters. Right? When you become older and more mature, being Dharma is the only thing that's important. Let me invite the youngsters to have a pause and just for a moment allow themselves to find a tremendous interest in just this, yes, the future, but the next moment future. Moment by moment by moment, breath by breath. And for the old geezers, right? How about just falling open into the fullness of your living? It's possible as you're doing this that you may already be appreciating that there's something extra about falling into the fullness of the living that you are, in companionship with others who are doing a similar thing. This is not a kind of a withdrawal into an inner isolation of meditation. This is an expansion into a communal presence of life. In the immeasurable expanse of nature in process, in faith and trust and wonderment, we give ourselves to this suchness, this seamless mystery of birth and dying. Spacious, loving, with feet solid in the earth. We nurture the hints at blessedness. The myriad faces, the masks of luminous knowing. Moving as this flow of compassion and deepening inquiry, we engage with all beings in ways that support the integrity, the stability, and the beauty of the entire field of life and living. For the sake of all beings, wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. I would very much like to take you all on a journey, but it's difficult because we're of different, some of us can't walk very far and we get tired out, and some people didn't bring their hiking boots, and the other thing is that some people are only appearing as a kind of some pixelated luminescence on the surface in our room. But I sort of have the idea that behind all of that there might be actually flesh and blood human beings out there. And so it's difficult for us to go on a kind of traditional, ordinary journey. And so I'd like to begin the class by taking you on a journey by means of poetry. And I know you've come to study the path of integration and to go more deeply into primordial Dharma and all that kind of wonderful stuff. But I would like to read for you a poem. This is not one of mine, right? This is one of Patian Rogers. We're having a Patian Rogers phase here. And it's called The Woodland Snail at Twilight. Okay. And I'd like you to see if you can receive these words in a very open, fluid, responsive way, right? Because I think they're hinting at something marvelous. And can you feel this in your body, not just as a kind of a concept? The snail, Helix hortensis, Being multidimensional.
Can you hear okay? So you're all sort.
We'll just pause a moment and we'll have a restart. Are we okay? I don't quite know what. Was that something you did?
Someone unmuted themselves.
Oh, I see.
All done now.
Let's begin again. Okay? The snail, Helix hortensis, being multidimensional, touches in any moment many more things than one. The mucus tongue of his single foot, as sensitive as a bloom of honeysuckle, licks, probes each bump and fissure of the fallen hickory twig. And while the polish of his stone back between clouds and shadows assumes the light of the dawning Alpha Centauri, the crude eye of his tentacle tip seeks and becomes one with the emerging blue point of Jupiter. This is the snail crawling along at twilight. Brother to the temperate forest floor. He touches also by kinship. The snail that touches the snail, that sleeps in ice above the snow line of the Himalayas. And he is bound by blood to the conical, creamy white snail that pulls over desert dust to shelter in gold Chihuahua flax. He is cousin to cuttlefish, paper nautilus, blue-ringed octopus, and the cowrie volva type of shellfish. Right? Likewise related to pearl mussel, spiny oyster, naked sea butterfly, and otter shell. He has a claim, therefore, to intimacy with the 8 webbed coordinates of the sea, the rock hinges and latches of the will, jeweled hearts, gliding nudibranch bodies of all ocean angels. The embodied abstraction. He is made kin to wavering underwater sun by the undulating thrust of his own locomotion. Can you see this snail, the way the mantle flows along, right? This flow, this so-called foot, that it flows along like this tiny little taste buds all underneath. It's feeling and tasting everything. It's responding and shifting. It's seeing the light of stars and planets. By his body parts having twisted 180 degrees in the egg, he has experienced every inverted aspect of above and below, within and without, and he has essential knowledge of left, for his shell opens always to the right. He has touched even the inner stem of the human brain, for he alone gives rise to the slow caravan of self-sufficiency of snail dreams. Now he is concentrating the meteorological elements of the evening in his damp, weighty movement of body in the palm of my hand, held in the vice of my attention. See how he touches me and the one beyond me at my shoulder and the one beyond the one beyond. See how this snail on her hand years later is touching people in a room in New Zealand. Watch now and be alert. What foundations are jarred? What history shaken by the beginning turn and stretch of his four horns? The advancing quiver of his tilting case. Watch now and be alert. What foundations are jarred? What histories shaken by the beginning turn and stretch of the blink of your eye, of the flicker of your attentiveness, of the softening of attention in your thigh or your ankle. Thank you.
Oh, that deserves a resounding standing ovation.
Just consider for a moment, right? This is a story, allegorically, our story. Right? You know, you're in the story of our life, we were inside and outside. We've been upside down and inside out. Right? Things involute and flow through each other. Blastulas turning on themselves and form tubules. You know, it's like extraordinary. This is in your history, your story. Right? And just as your experience right now is obviously a kind of continuation and reverberation of your driving here and who you met on the road and the various events that took place today. This is obviously affecting us. Okay? And yet there was a time when we were one cell. And we were, as a cell, we were just extraordinarily, intimately sensuous. Okay? A cell doesn't have a front and a back. It doesn't just, it senses up there, but it's kind of oblivious to what's back there. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, and when I say sensitive and when I say sensual, I mean that it's sensing. But the way cells sense is that they sense by operating. I was thinking just before I came over for the class, I was standing in my room and I have a big Buddha Rupa in my room. And this particular Buddha Rupa, Buddha statue, right, is one in which the Buddha is sitting with the left hand in the lap and the right hand is down in what they call the earth witness mudra, or the earth touching mudra, very classical kind of Buddha. Right? And I was just kind of pondering Padyan Rogers and pondering life and suddenly seeing something which was so obviously clear but somehow never really struck me before, was that this kind of posture was in a sense modeling, right? The fact that we have, on one hand, we've got this extraordinary reaching out into the world, perception, acts of perception. You get a sense of this, right? And the difficulty is with this is that because many of us really have no idea how perception takes place. In fact, I could go so far as to say no one has any idea how perception takes place, but some people have a more rich idea of possibilities of how it takes place, and others have less rich ideas. Right? And we don't realize necessarily that you've got a sense organ. right? You got a little sensitive pad in your finger, or you've got a retinal cell, or you've got a little hairy bit in your snail. The snail in your head, the inner ear, right? And it's sensitive, right? And you kind of vaguely realize that then, somebody went in there with a soldering kit and sort of soldered in a wire and connected it to this other wire, because it's sort of like a radio or TV or computer or something like that, right? And so that's called a nerve, that kind of wire, and it kind of runs from there to some place in a kind of dense tanglement of nerves called the brain. Maybe not even called the brain, maybe just a plexi of nerves in the spinal cord. But spinal cord, it's hard to see where the spinal cord ends off and the brain begins. It's we're getting it right. There's something going on here. And so we've got this sense of the data that's coming back through all these kind of nerves and so on, taking data up to the brain. What we don't often realize is that there's almost an equal number of nerves, in a sense, coming back to the sense cell, right? These are motor nerves, right, towards the sensing place of sensing. And so, and before we even have a perception, there's already a kind of reciprocity of change between what we're perceiving and how we perceive. And, right, this is like before we even realize, oh, I'm in a room here. Huh? Now, this is already getting a bit complicated, because it makes you start to wonder, what on earth I'm seeing? Am I seeing what's actually there, or I'm seeing what I collaborate with the mystery out there, and somehow together we make something? Right? But it's worse than that. It's way worse than that. Right? Because roughly, let's say this is not accurate in any sense of the way, but it's kind of good enough for this class. Right? Let's say, for example, you've got somewhat equal number of nerve cells going from the kind of motor nerves, right, as sensory nerves, and together this is kind of sensory motor system kind of thing. And so for every one of those, we have 100,000 interneurons. These are nerves which are not connecting directly to a muscle, or not connecting directly to sensory organ or something like this. They're just gossip machines, right? They talk to each other, blah, 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 blah. And it's usually about what somebody else said. You know what I mean? So and in this, there's like huge adjustments, and there's huge range of possibilities. Now, you see, long before you became what I've just described, you were just an incredibly sensitive single cell. Okay? And you were kind of a dancing now, not of kind of sense organs and nerves and so on, but you're dancing of molecules, right? And these molecules, and they dance quickly, in terms of when measured up against what we call time. Things go fast, faster than the blink of an eye. Right? Have you ever just sat quietly and just sort of felt a kind of almost like a incredibly subtle, buzz is too strong a word, it's like a kind of humming, kind of aliveness. It's like your organism is alive. Right? You particularly notice it when a piece of your organism goes to sleep, your leg or something like that. And then as it becomes more alive, you get and then it settles down. It's not very nice when it's buzzing in there, but this quiet, and we call nothing's happening. Now, you see, let's imagine for a moment you didn't begin just a mere number of decades ago as a single cell. You began about 4, give or take a lot of years, billion years ago. Right? That's where the single cell started, right? Somewhere there, right? And there was this kind of, almost like there's seeing, and responding, right? The Buddha reached down. On one hand, this is the connection with the world. On this hand here is the interneurons, is the interconnection within the organism, right? And between the two, we maneuver, if you like, right? This is not negotiable. It's not. You don't have to sign up to be a Buddhist for this to take place. Right? We've been doing this. This is what we've been doing all along, right? And I want you to. I'm not going to speak in detail here because that would be impossible, right? Given the amount. Well, impossible for many reasons, right? But I'm going to speak in a very general sense, right? Somehow there was kind of shifting and an opening of diversity of species, a diversity of an evolving of a diversity of different cells that sometimes work together symbiotically, right? We think of these as skills. You just take interstellar nothingness and you sort of like just put it down there and go, okay, live. I don't know how to do that. You know, like, well, you're going to actually let go of that electron, and then you pick that one up. You pick that one up. No, not two, not one. Can you imagine trying to control this? You know, like the activity of over time. There's a tremendous amount of engagement. Single cells. You can see movies of. We've all seen films of single cells moving around sort of maybe in an area, big ones that are easy to film, paramecia or something like that. And they might be crawling around and it's like they're curious and they pull back and then they push back in there and they're doing things. And meanwhile, the beauty of the cells is that they're also, many of them are very translucent. So while you see the cell doing something, you can see little teeny dots of sort of rods and stringy bits and whatever you can discern there inside the cell, which are kind of doing stuff too. Right? You got this kind of inside and outside, right? This doing, right? And we're learning skills, for example, of metabolism. Right? We're learning skills of like this incredible skill like replication of DNA. It took a lot of work. A lot of beings have worked on this, right? Over a long period of time. You know, how to metabolize glucose, right? How to kind of survive when your food source that you like and is easy to use disappears. How on earth does adaptation, if we're just sort of single machines that only do what we're programmed to do, how on earth did we ever adapt to changing conditions? This has something to do with primordial Dharma. I thought I'd just say so in case you leave now. The poetry was okay, but whatever Tarshan's going on about now, it's... Okay? Imagine for a moment that what's happening in a big scale is that the biosphere is accumulating skills for living. Right? In particularly in the Tibetan exposés of the teaching, you'll come across this kind of format of the 5 paths or the 5 stages of awakening, and the first stage is called the stage of accumulation. And in the stage of accumulation, you say, oh, well, I accumulate various skills that I need and qualities and so on. And then the next stage is kind of preparation or integration, or it's called a number of things, right? And you kind of integrate this into my being. And then finally, enlightenment, seeing, you get the full Monty experience, right? But the way I'm presenting it here is I'd like you to consider the possibility that these are not sort of a kind of conceptual format invented by Buddhists to describe what happens. But actually these stages parallel the stages of how life has unfolded on this planet and how life unfolds as us as individuals. So, for example, let's fast forward. Let's get to a human embryo. That's a big fast forward. A lot of stuff happened before then, right? But now we got a human embryo. Now you can relate to it, right? Incredibly sensuous, right? You're just kind of rubbing up against sentient being. Everywhere you go, you rub against a sensitive living being. It doesn't matter where you go. You're surrounded. You were born into a living universe. You were conceived into a living universe. This is something that we don't, we say, oh, test tube babies. It's goofy. How can we even consider such a concept? Right? We were, all of us, without being surrounded by life that was already, in a sense, geared to respond in ways that nurture and facilitate our beingness, we wouldn't exist. Right? And there we are, one little single cell. Hi, Mom. Now what am I going to do with this? Hi, Mom. What am I going to do with this? Right? This is not the only kind of way of looking at these, but I think it's a kind of an interesting way of looking at this mudra. Right? As in a kind of a very universal kind of hint at something. Right? And so we begin to kind of, we're accumulating, we've already accumulated it somehow, the skills of collaborating with each other. Right? It takes more than one cell to make a tissue. It takes more than one cell to make an organ. Right? Imagine for a moment, it's really difficult. You're sitting there and all of a sudden this huge lobe of your kidney, your liver, just decides that it's kind of bored. And it's not interested anymore. I'm thinking of going retraining. There's something, it's extraordinary. Just to think of this, it's like incredible. I'm sick and tired of, living in groups is all fine, but you've got to have these continual group meetings. It's constant consensus and organization. It takes ages. It's just so frustrating. I'm just going to go off and live on my own. Get my own place, Oregon Hermitage. Right? Good luck. Right? We can't live on our own. Now this, by the way, is this is really simple, and we could take this at a very simple, big deal. We can't live, everyone knows that. But do we really know this? What would it actually imply to know this? I think it'd be, if you had hair, raise your hair. Whoa. Right? All kinds of skills, right, that we're learning. And not only that, but you see there's variety in the process of evolving a communal, collective, symbiont organism. Because sometimes we collaborate by kind of symbiotic relationship, and sometimes we eat each other and then live inside each other. And it gets incredibly, there's a lot of collaboration that's going on here. Right? And we start to develop a nervous system and all this. And most of this takes place without having to buy from Amazon How to Grow a Fetus for Dummies. Consider it. You didn't have to do anything. You could just watch TV, and the whole thing just happens on its own. It's great. We don't have any responsibility to participate in this. And we accumulate mass, we accumulate weight, right? We accumulate experience. We accumulate, it's a strange way of saying it, but as time goes through, we kind of accumulate history. Like there's a kind of a, we could say, oh, well, these old, we call history habit patterns, right? And you every day, you Buddhists, you sit there and you pray, may I be relieved from clinging. Actually should be praying, may my heart cling. May my liver cells cling. I want you just to be liver cells. Just be happy liver cells. Like, just do that habit. Huh? I mean, I'm joking, but you can see, like, we are, but this is the history. The history is a history of habits, right? Metabolic habits, neuromuscular habits, right? Kind of brain operated habits of how those interneurons make music together. They're kind of like, they have rhythms and pulsations and kind of like the frequencies. Oh, drink. I mean, what's the inner music of reaching to scratch your ear? There's a kind of like a shift in tone and so on. They're all jazz musicians, right? Nobody's written the score. It's not Bach, wonderful as that is. But it's not a written score. It's continuously evolving and changing through experience. Okay? And we gradually start to accumulate kind of huge, amazing skills, like, for example, to be able to sit upright and not fall over. We develop skills to be able to crawl. We've already, strangely enough, there's all kinds of skills already. We start to actually refine our skills to be able to track a moving object with our eyes. Now, that's incredible. You got this kind of thing that's going across here, and you've got the data coming in, through the sense nerves, right? And then the other ones are coming back down to all the kind of little muscles and everything around here, and they're just kind of, oh, too fast, I got ahead of it. Too slow, I got behind it. We learn to see. Imagine for a moment that the path of accumulation is not, it doesn't have to be called that. We could call it the path of learning, right? Learning new necessary skills. We learn to stand up and to walk. We learn to, just consider the physiology of it, how outrageous it must be to learn to talk. And the interesting thing is now we're at a stage where I can illustrate something. Right? In the womb, right, with ultrasound, we can see the baby moving limbs. Right? They kind of, and there's movements that look kind of twitchy. They kind of like sudden, it's just kind of, and it's almost like the nervous system is kind of just it's kind of, it hasn't learned to kind of coordinate things to, reach out and get the doorknob and open the door and step out of the womb. It doesn't, right? Not sophisticated enough for that, right? We're kind of, it's still kind of jerky movements. We haven't kind of learned to kind of collaborate them with other things, right? And when you're a young baby, you'll see the baby kind of does reachings and so on. It kind of already moves, right? But it learns to kind of coordinate, if you like, moving with seeing, with hearing, and so on, right? And you begin to see that there's all kinds of different ways of moving. But if you don't want that thing close to you, you move this way by pushing it away. Right? If you want that thing over there, you move this way by toddling towards it. Right? These are skills that you learn, not because somebody told you how to do it. Thank God. Right? The best mother in the world's for sure going to leave out some critical instruction. You try your best, but it's way too complex. Way too complex. Like, the trouble with us humans, I think the problem with us humans is that we're human chauvinists and so on, and we think we're the cat's meow. No, actually, it's not like that at all. The problem with human beings is that we suffer from staggering inferiority delusions. And we think that we're just this little tiny something in a great big universe. We don't realize that what we are is a collaboration of gazillions of intelligent entities which are all moving together, and we haven't yet owned who and what we are. Right? And so when you're kind of really small, you think everyone's dangerous and anyone might pick on me, and what do I do? And you're trying to, can you tell me a technique that I can protect myself with? And all the time, there's this kind of, even like thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, billions of years of evolution are giving rise to the possibility to gripe like that. Right? Even the complaining requires brilliance. Right? So what I'm trying to say is, like, up until now, it seems that we almost like this experimental, and then meanwhile the organism is like consulting itself all the time. You do this and your belly feels this way, or you don't know what a feeling is. You don't know what a mental state is. You don't know what an arm is or a leg is or anything. And you're kind of like, there's this kind of swimming together, and you're kind of making, the whole thing is total experimental. That's what children are doing when they're playing. They're actually not playing. They're 100% engaged with extraordinary experimental learning. We call it playing, because it doesn't make any money, or it doesn't produce an object or something like that. And it's, that's playing, right? You can't spend the rest of your life playing. Why not? That'd be a fantastic thing to do. I think we should all spend the rest of our life playing. But we can learn, many of these learnings, if you like, take place without a lot of effort on the part of an ego. You're with me on this, right? So there's a huge amount of learning that takes place, like, say, up to the age of, I don't want to make a hard age on it, but let's say like 2 or 3 or something like that. Just think of how much learning goes on. I mean, if you've got close enough contact with someone of those ages, either because you've got close contact with yourself at those ages, or with your parent, or you've got children, or what have you, or you've just got a good imagination, right? It's obvious, right, that just the amount of change that takes place in the being between the moment that they emerged from the womb to being a 2.5-year-old is just outrageous. There's a lot of accumulated experience. There's a lot of learning that's taking place, right? But gradually, without kind of trying to explain in any kind of physiological way how this comes about, gradually we start to get an increasing sense of being someone, and that other beings are being them, self and other, right? We get this kind of sense, right? And somewhere around here, this fantastic, wondrous accumulation learning process starts to kind of falter. And it falters because we are constantly flooded with ideas that life's on about shoulds and oughts. And so instead of actually experimentally, playfully unfolding into the next moment, right, actually participating in this, right, you start to sort of think yourself as a child. You're just a child, so your opinion doesn't matter. And we start playing because we need this intimacy and this kind of surround of living beings to be healthy. We don't sort of grow in this and then we emerge into an empty universe. We never get out of it. We're in this kind of womb of becoming. Okay? And instead of kind of like going further with it, in order to go further with this, our ability to decide to do this or to do that, to be involved with this or to be involved with that, happens. You don't just, if you just take a baby, grow them up to 2.5, and then leave them a bit longer, they become a master meditator. It doesn't happen. Right? You have to make effort. Right? You actually have to now start to get actively involved with this process, because before it was a kind of an unconscious consciousness that was involved. Now it's a conscious consciousness that's involved. Don't worry, all the other participants are still working there. You're not on your own. Ego doesn't have to do it on its own. Right? But we can't do it without it either. No human being becomes a mature human adult without developing a healthy ego, a healthy sense of self. Right? And with that healthy sense of self, right, along with this might now begin to kind of emerge. I just want to check something here. Yeah, this might now start to kind of emerge that we are curious about what's going on. When did you first become curious about what's going on? You were curious about what was going on before you even realized you were curious about what was going on. That 0-year-old growing up to the 2.5-year-old was just an expression, continuous curiosity about what's going on. And they didn't necessarily know that they were being curious about what's going on. Right? And in the process, sometimes people have such, unfortunately, this is just a reality we have to work with. And that is that childhood, that learning, that first stage on the path of accumulation was not always facilitated by the other beings around us. And so some children are encouraged to let their curiosity take them into learning situations. But some are discouraged. And some are traumatized. And some are abused. Right? I mean, it's just a sad fact of growing up. Right? And quite often we come to Dharma, right, out of a feeling of the dissatisfaction and the suffering. You know, as Namjo used to say a number of times, no one gives a damn about awakening when they're feeling good. You know, it's kind of a backhanded comment in a sense that the suffering kind of might drive us to ask a question. Right? And so now we start to, now we hit the official Buddhist path of accumulation. Right? There are qualities to really be able to enter into the implications of the fullness of our interbeing, interknowingness. There are certain qualities that have to be there. Right? Otherwise you just don't get there. Right? There need to be qualities, and these are qualities that we develop in the process of practicing Dharma. Okay? I mean, for example, we need to have skills in selective attentiveness to be able to attend to this when I want to attend to this. Because a lot of our meditation training is training us in this skill. We need to have skills in appreciating the subtle the inner one, the dynamic that's going on, because inside here is all those interneurons, right? The interneurons are like they're the ones that make things messy, right? The sensory motor neurons are simple, right? Get a little apple tree appears in the eye, right? Goes to the brain, apple tree, upside down apple tree back there, right? Comes down, right? Don't like apple trees, look away, right? So you just do that. But the problem is the interneurons, they go, oh, that's, yeah, but then your toes involved. And then a kind of a tendency of that kind of, remember I was talking about the music that's going on in there. It's kind of an old reverberation of music. Oh yeah, apple trees. There was a time under the apple tree. You know, dee-da. Oh yeah, remember that time we were on holiday and we went there, right? And you're kind of wandering off. And the next thing you know, you're a million miles away from your so-called appreciating of this dancing, of the simple thing of seeing the apple tree and not wanting to look at it, right? But you're off in an incredible fantasy about people who have conspired to force you to look at apple trees, and you hate them and they know it. And how are you going to get revenge, right? You know, where's this happening? Out there? Sometimes the very beings who are being accused of doing all these nasty things have no idea it's going on. It's totally happening inside the mind, or inside the vault of interneurons. You know, you got 100,000 chances for sort of wandering off for every moment of perception. Right? It's just the way we're built, right? And so now, as a kind of emerging bodhisattva, right, we might go, I want to understand this more directly. I want to be able to ask the question, what on earth is going on? Not what in my fantasies is going on, not what in somebody else's opinion is going on, not what on another galaxy is going on, or not in the Tawatimsa heaven is going on, right? Or not in some kind of concept of earth is going on, but what on earth, in the ground, in this spot, what is happening? Okay? And we might begin to, we start to accumulate skills that make it possible that we can hold such a question fruitfully. That's the real thing we're accumulating. The skill to keep this wonderment question vibrantly through our being. Not accumulating skills in anapanasati, breathing meditation, or skills in the six parami and so on. All those things that they name are supports for recognizing and holding this kind of vibrant curiosity, wonderment, question, engagement, and a willingness to kind of and we grow with it, and we grow into some new direction. We're snails. Okay? We're kind of responding right now to the light of the sun. 8.5 minutes ago I was saying something or another, and some photons left the sun. Right? And they've just now gone ping. Oh, you were a bit late. Late for class. Right? We just live in an old sun, don't we? 8.5 minutes old. It's a peculiar kind of thing, right? So can you feel this in your being? How consistent is this kind of, I want to participate in this extraordinary mystery of life unfolding, whatever that is. Because actually, if you've got any kind of knowledge at all, this is the wisdom side, you realize that you don't have a dicky bird what it is. Right? Stupid people think they know what it is. Oh, it's a planet, it's physiology, it's biology, it's happening, it's all evolution. These are all kind of conceptual attempts to describe the mystery. And there's no value in describing the mystery except when the attempt to describe the mystery somehow goes hand in hand with a kind of vibrancy of aliveness and wonderment and willingness to engage. And so we're kind of accumulating skills in loving kindness, in compassion, in patience, in presence, in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, skills in working with feelings and emotions, skills with working with concepts. We can, there's a lot of learning to go on here, and it might take a number of years to do this, right? But what I'm trying to point out is that this is not something that you should be doing. This is something we are already doing. It just simply became a little bit more conscious. And I wonder if humanity can evolve further without becoming this more conscious. Because I think in the unconscious, our responses and so on are so kind of chaotic that the system is breaking. And this is not just something you do because you're kind of interested, or I'm a more religious type or something. This is flowing rivers and mountain ranges and plate tectonics and critters and snails. One of the, gradually, like if you look at it, we'll see that in a way, this is a lot of what we possibly call the kind of neuroses of our culture is a reflection of this wonderful thing I'm just talking about. And that is that we seem to be living in a culture that's just like actually quite addicted to accumulation. We're always looking for new experiences, you know what I mean? Like they're all kind of like this is so all I'm doing is saying, maybe we're not trying to do something different. If we were trying to do something that was radically different, we'd be in trouble. We wouldn't be able to do it. Right? We've got to work with what we've got. So you're hungry to accumulate. Well, okay, accumulate better stuff than that worser stuff. I mean, I'm expressing it in the most generalized sense. I mean, you can study and memorize the whole of the Abhidhamma categories and all the kind of Buddhist terminologies and so on, and it doesn't take you an inch closer to what we're talking about. Unless such studies filled you with wonderment and interest, then of course they're taking you there. But it's not the Buddhist stuff that's taking you there. It's the aliveness that you are, the kind of ungraspable, ineffable, I don't want to call it bodhicitta, I've just called it bodhicitta. Right? Because I don't want to call it anything. It's this mystery that we're in. How wondrous we're in this mystery. And what you find is that very naturally, and I kind of hinted at this at the beginning when I made jokes about old geezers and young geezers, right? That gradually, as you get older, I mean, I've met a number of people. I'm gonna point my finger here, right? Without pointing my finger, but I'll point my finger. But I've had conversations with a few people recently who've actually confessed to me that they're kind of in a process of downsizing. And I confess to you too that, I mean, Stephen's just come back from an extraordinary dive trip in New Guinea or someplace like that. They're seeing I imagine you saw all kinds of incredible fish and everything. And Tarshan goes, I'll just stay here. and I can't, maybe we start to not have this compulsion to accumulate, possibly because we've got enough, possibly because we're drowning in the stuff we've accumulated, right? Possibly because, all the stuff I've accumulated is so precious to me, I've got to find someone who also thinks it's precious so I can give it to them, before I die. And then you discover to your dismay that nobody's interested in your most precious possessions, right? So you sort of hang on to it, waiting to give it to your grandchildren, and then it turns out finally you die and it goes to your grandchildren, and it very shortly goes to the op shop. Because we always feel that somehow we identify with what we've accumulated. Imagine for a moment, in the light that I'm talking about, that what we're accumulating is skills in living. Well, surely to identify with being these skills in living is quite sensible. Of course we identify with what we've accumulated. Right? But we also come to a stage where, for whatever reasons, I think the stage of accumulation probably goes in human beings until they breathe their absolute last breath and their last cell stops twitching. So you don't transcend accumulation and move on to higher things, right? But it's somewhere along the line you realize that actually you've got a lot of skills. You know, I know how to make music, I know how to write a book, I know how to give a class, I know how to walk, I know how to get food, right? And so when I get food, generally speaking, I never think about the music. When I think about the music, I don't know how to teach a class. And when I'm teaching a class, I forget about poetry and so on. But gradually, you begin to realize that these skills all start to kind of flow in and through each other. Your skills in patience support your skills in observation. Your observation supports skills in framing a question and determining an avenue of potential experimental exploration. Right? And so the path of integration, sort of, it's not like, okay, I finished the accumulation, I've got these things, now it's time to do the path of it's not like that. It's more like you tend to describe the human experience as living a path of accumulation. But somewhere along the line, and it was already happening in the womb physiologically, it was already the path of integration is starting to take place. That's actually maybe what all those gossip nerves are on about. You know, I wonder if this will be a new fad. You know, like mirror nerves became. People wrote books on it. Everyone was into the mirror. Now Tarshan's invented a new one. Somebody write a paper on it and gossip nerves, right? And so we're kind of accumulating, and now we're integrating. There's an integration. This kind of subjective, this subjective responsiveness, subjective knowing. I can act as an integrated organism. You know, when I drink the glass of water, a lot of my body's involved. Maybe all my body's involved, but I'm at least aware of a lot of it being involved. It's like there's an integration that happens to perform this. Like you're integrating a whole lot of parts are in one kind of integrated way. And so gradually what you find is that the meditator, the skilled, at the beginning, the path of Dharma is to accumulate wongkurs and empowerments and teachings and skills and samadhis and insights and libraries of texts and all this kind of stuff, years in retreat, and you're accumulating all this kind of stuff. And then gradually, you kind of look at it. Maybe not everyone does this, but some people do. You kind of look at it and you go, I'm not really that interested in accumulating more stuff. That's not what's actually, I'm still accumulating stuff. But it's not what's kind of most overtly driving me. What's overtly driving me now is to begin to cultivate the possibility of appreciating and understanding how it all works together as a seamless whole. Right? Now we can call this the path of integration. Right? It's not, I'm a part and how am I going to get integrated? No, don't you do it by more accumulation. Right? These paths they're names of stages of development that after the fact, not before the fact. Right? So then you go on and now you're blending accumulation and integration. Right? And we're learning, and in this one we're resting. And there's certain skills that we can use, right, to enhance this path of integration. Right? And for example, the 5 supports that I suggest in this Nectar of Naturalness. Right? And so you think of like a smile of wellness. It's a smile of wellness. And when things are coming to you and there's a smile of wellness, you say, welcome. And when things are going away from you, it's called loss, you go well. And when things just seem to be stuck with you and they're neither coming nor going, you go, be well. Right? This smile of wellness is an attitude. It's not a lip posture. It's not a facial expression. Although, right, walking around being really grumpy and tense in your face and everything like this does tend to obscure this presence of wellness. Think of we talk about wellness all the time, wellness, and you kind of have instead of gross national product, we could sort of judge it on wellness or something. Beautiful, wonderful. But actually, wellness, this is not just a kind of a concept that sits there called wellness. It's a tool for exploration. It's how to be with stuff that's coming to you. A thought, a feeling, a memory, a perception, a challenge. And so that thing can come to you and your response is welcome. Welcome. Right? And things can go away from you. Your dearest and nearest die. I'm not making a horrible joke about this. This is real. Right? And that we can actually, in a sense, where they go well. We can, in a sense, that's the letting go. We go, letting go, it's almost like, this is terribly gross, but it'll give the illustration perfectly. Has anyone here ever picked their nose? It's not the kind of thing that you're supposed to sort of do in public, and I could like demonstrate it for you, Yeah. And then sometimes, have you ever sort of fished out of your nose a kind of juicy booger? I don't know what you call them, but anyway, there's kind of like a little kind of booger snot thing, right? And then what do you do with it? It's incredible, right? So you go like this. You go, and then it's stuck on the end of your thumb, right? And then you go like that, and it's stuck on the end of this finger, right? So if nobody's looking around and Mary's not around, you wipe it on your shirt, right? Or you kind of reach into your pocket, get a handkerchief maybe, and do it very neatly. It's kind of like this sticky thing, and you can't kind of get rid of it. You're trying to go away, and the harder you go away, you're basically in. Whereas actually, if we were in this smiling state of wellness, we would be able to say, "Go well," and boom, off it goes. It follows its trajectory. We don't have to we can let go. These are skills. These are profound skills. They're not methods. They're not kind of. They're skills that involve your entire physiology. To welcome someone, you can imagine welcoming someone, but don't use your knees. It's bizarre, like I welcome you, but my lungs are involved with breathing, so they can't really give you the attention. But you're welcome. Make yourself at home. Right? Imagine the whole of integrated being and integration, like well, right? And sometimes we're like with something, and it just seems to be there, and it's going on. And sometimes it's going on, it's beautiful. And sometimes it's going on and it's not beautiful. And can we go be well? Right? Like I'm not suggesting you solve this with these like little soundbite phrases. That's not it. I'm saying that the soundbite phrase is a hint at a global possibility of being. Right? So smiling. This is smiling. This is the smile of wellness. This is the vast expanse of wellness, sugata. And then breathing, right? We're integrating it. Come back. Have you ever noticed yourself breathing while you're driving the car? I'm glad. Because if you're not breathing when you're driving the car, I pray for all the other people on the road. Right? As their corpse goes by, breathing into, right? Right? Like this sense of like to be willing to engage with what's actually happening in the world is this state of wellness. Right? And actually to be able to engage with what's happening in the world is an essential, non-negotiable quality of living. I mean, some amazing Buddhists got onto a fantastic scam. They took all these natural qualities of living, gave them fancy names, and sold them back to the public. Right? And we'll kind of make a fortune of this, and we can start a movement. But actually, it's all, you don't actually have to pay to breathe. You don't have to kind of have a special mantra to breathe. But breathing does make mantras. Right? So we're breathing, smiling and breathing right now. Right? We're dropping into the fullness. Like rather than trying, the path of integration is one of fanatical, obsessive, trying to be balanced and have it all going. Imagine for a moment it was more like somehow letting go with sensitivity and appreciation. And feel for this. It's much easier to describe meditation in terms of kind of mechanical techniques. That's easy. Right? So we're smiling, we're breathing. The whole body breathing. We're training ourselves to kind of return to this appreciation of a living, pulsating, breathing organism. And in the process of studying our breathing, we're probably going to meet with muscles, because breathing is a muscular activity. We're probably going to meet with emotions, because emotions seem to accompany different rhythms and textures of breathing. Right? We're probably going to come in contact with thoughts and conceptual ideas, because they too seem to have an effect on the way we breathe. Right? We come into contact with hills, depending on whether you're going up them or down them, because those too have effect on the way we breathe. The breathing is it becomes like a kind of an always with you barometer of incredibly sensitive change, right? Responding to so many different facets of what's going on. And so therefore it's a very useful, fundamental tool. Not, as a beginner you should practice anapanasati and breathing, learn to do that, then you can move on to the profound practice. Okay? Now this is just forget about meditation. We don't want meditation, not interested in meditation. Right? We're interested in accumulating skills of holding a sense of sensitive, responsive, interest-filled aliveness. There's a curiosity there, right? And that is when our breathing is very subtle and quiet, you'll notice you become very sensitive. You start to notice more stuff. Right? So it's a skill like this, present. Right? Smiling, breathing, present. Right? We're learning to kind of have all our sense doors open, beginning to appreciate how light and visual form flickers through memory, and memory kind of activates glands. Right, you salivate, or you kind of there's a response, and then that activates something else, and right, it's like this extraordinary thing, and we're learning to kind of not only do I see the world, but I am a visual object for a seeing world. So as I am seeing, I am seen, and as I'm hearing, I'm being heard, and as I'm smelling, I'm being smelt. Oh, and I'm smiling, and I'm welling. I'm welling up with this. smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, right? And gradually our curiosity begins to appreciate how these things connect. Right? And in the process of seeing how they connect, we suddenly have, that's this part out here. It's like, oh, how we connect, right? This part's happening. Oh, I don't like this kind of connection. Oh, this is a terrifying connection. Oh, this is a horrible connection, or I hate this connection. And then we're sort of spaced out by that. So part of the skills we're learning to stay with this is to also the skill of hospital work, of making friends with and nurturing and supporting those weak, those fearful, those scared parts of our being. It's not a different type of the whole thing goes together. Insight practice and profound healing practice are inseparably one. Without there being healing, there'll be no insight. And without there being insight, there'll be no healing. And so as bodhisattvas, we're beginning to kind of take this on. And especially when you get older and you got less that you have to do. You know, if you're blessed with the good fortune of living in a wealthy enough community where, you know, you're not actually worried about the roof over your head or the food that's coming in, although there are many humans on the planet who do worry about the roof over their head and the food coming in. But most of us participating in this class are living in a most extraordinary, privileged, physically privileged position, right? And you can see, like, as an oldster now, apologizing for any people who feel like that doesn't apply to them, right? But as an oldster, you can notice how, you know, one of the things with coming to grips with a kind of failing body and a failing memory and a kind of a failing physical strength and a kind of, you know, you ever notice this kind of stuff? Okay? And then what you do is you decide, well, what I should do is I'll go and learn another language. Because I'm told that, like, by learning a language, I'll keep my brain alive, right? Or I know, I got my bucket list. I'm going to go, I never actually went, I'll go and do a trip. Go and do a thing, or maybe I could do this, or maybe I don't know what to do with ourselves. We don't know, you know, in retirement, what on earth are you going to retire? And you don't have a job to do anymore, and what are you going to just play golf all day? You know, or, I mean, some people, yay, that was great, and I'm not negating that, right? You could have enlightened golf, but what about the possibility that instead of having to just fill up with more habits of accumulation, we actually began to realize that actually doing nothing but opening this immense exploration of the integrate, right? My body, speech and mind, feelings, memories, self and other. Like, I'm coming to a sense of a whole world, an integrated ecosystem. Like, not that I am integrating an ecosystem, but I am beginning to appreciate how it's always been in a state of integration. Even when it's disaster, it takes an integrated disaster to make it, you know, integration have a disaster. Apoptosis, you know, like a kind of cell death, suicide, if you like, is an unbelievably complex system, which requires, like, little organelles have to be actually built inside the cells so that they can then begin to dismantle themselves, right? It takes fantastic collaborative intelligence, right, to do apoptosis, right? I'm trying to say, whereas you might say, oh, cell death was a bad thing, right? Actually, cell death is a good thing, says anyone who has cancer, right? The problem is you don't have cell death. You damn it, I forgot how to die, right? And so the cells just keep replicating all over the thing, right? So to actually give yourself to this, not there comes a time, let go necessarily of the formal practices and the sadhanas and all this kind of stuff. Just use them when you might have a moment of kind of forgetting the juice of the wonderment of it all. Then use that. The purpose is not to take you to the real place, but the purpose is to guide you back to the juice of the wonderment. And when you've got the juice of the wonderment, you don't need that. Right? So you might think, well, what am I practicing? I'm practicing smiling, of wellness, of breathing, of presence, of appreciating. And I'm beginning to realize that moment by moment by moment by moment, this living that I am, which is experimental, all right from the beginning, learning new skills, collaborating and so on, this is the only thing I have to offer, and I offer it to the universe without attachment. Okay? I don't have anything to offer. I go down to the shop and see if I can buy something. Your existence is your offering. The question isn't whether you offer anything. The question is, what is it you're offering? Let me offer you my boredom. The fact of the matter is that we offer the whole of our being all the time. And the whole of our being is sometimes like Swiss cheese. It's full of holes. Right? It's not very... I'm offering you my unintegrated being. You know? Smiling, breathing, present. Right? And then somebody does phone and somebody does ask for help. And how wonderful to be able to help. Right? And other times, you know, I had the hedge trimmer out, coming to the end of this class. Had the hedge trimmer out the other day, and I was just sort of tidying up an untidy clump of daisies. You see, right? So you get bzzz, right? And there was this humongously gigantic spider web that had been growing out from. It was nearly like the main guy wire was probably about 2 meters long, right? Big. Right? It just went from the post out here and went down to the far end of the daisies, right? And then it made a kind of a triangular thing, and then in the middle, after it got these big, huge guy wires, there was this spider. I got my scope on it yesterday, and this spider was like translucent yellow-green with green legs. Well, he's an amazing spider, big long things. And he's sitting in the middle of this extraordinary orb weaver's web, you know, like one of those perfect, amazing webs, right? And we were watching it over many days, and gradually, you know, things got caught in it, a petal, pollen, the whole thing became grubbier and grubbier, started to look like the whole, you know, we should clean it up. Yeah, but we can't. I mean, this guy lives here. What are we gonna do, you know? You can see eventually the house is going to be buried in cobwebs. So anyway, I had one of those moments where I got the machine and I just went zook, right? And I cut the top of the daisy off where the main guy wire was, and the whole thing went slump. And the spider ran up the spider web and sort of latched onto the post, right? So it's got there. So the spider's okay. It's okay now. Finish the haircut, right, on the thing. So now there's not a sign of. We sit there. We had a meal and looked at it. There's an empty space. No kind of just bits of pollen and block of dead bodies all hanging in space. Like none of this. It was all gone, right? And okay, that's it. I forgot all about it. We eat breakfast out there on the porch every morning, and the sun comes in. Next morning we're out having breakfast, right? And the spider had recreated the entire web, right? 2 meter long guy wire, was very similar shape, perfect, immaculate, beautiful. It's probably still out there actually, and like this is one of our companions, you know, like we're living with this, like we're life in life in life. The path of Dharma is to be blessed by interest in this. And that interest is the path you walk. And it's not just passive interest, like you sit there and go, look at it. You engage with it, because it's engaging with you. And we trial different ways, and we're learning more and more possible ways. I could respond this way, and I can respond this way. There's many ways I can lift my arms. It took me a long time to realize this, right? And so we are participating in an evolving world through our living. And if this isn't a glorious thing to do, I mean, it was good enough for God to make a world. Surely it'd be good enough for you. Next week we might return to the sadhana text. But this week I feel like I said it. Next week we just got to make a few little details. Are there any questions or thoughts or comments that anyone would like to share?
I have a question.
Yes.
The view that you've expressed is really kind of attractive as a way to be, and I often end up back in a kind of solidity, not experiencing a transparency that can dance the way that you're kind of suggesting. So then I think, well, in terms of my practice, what's kind of missing in being an emptiness and form at the same time, so that there's a freedom in the dance. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like if I'm stuck in the kind of form of me, then the spider's not me.
Well, I'm not sure that there's. You seem to be saying a dance of form and emptiness, and I don't understand that, because it seems to me the form is the emptiness and the emptiness is the form, and so there's not two things dancing. There's just the dance, and what is that dance of form and emptiness? It's living. It's emerging in the knowing of someone. We couldn't have the conversation if it wasn't emerging in the knowing of someone, right? And so I think that something which is again, this is not easy not simple to speak about, because it's kind of ineffable. It's a bit kind of ungraspable, right? But I'll try, right? And that is that, I think it's really what helps to bring together like formal practice and what I've been trying to kind of hint at this morning and kind of create the space. I wanted to take you on a journey, and I tried to take you on a journey, right? And I think what's really important to bring these together, so you don't have this and then you've got your practice, is that whilst you're engaging with your practice, there's somehow the capacity to be making it applicable to the absolute kind of physical, ordinary, everyday reality of your life, right? And you do that by you have to make that applicable. And how you do that is going to vary, like continuously. It varies obviously from for each individual person. But not only that, but it varies in the same person in the course of the day or weeks and so on, right? But it's like holding this, I mean, what is Chenrezig? Right? If I'm, or like, I'll just take that as an example because it's such a widely practiced form of Tibetan practice, right? So you're not just practicing Chenrezig. Oh, Chenrezig is the bodhisattva of compassion, wisdom, compassion, blah 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 blah. But what actually is Chenrezig? What does the word mean? What does great continuum seeing mean to me? And is this something that I need to bring into being, or do other people have it? Or in other words, the practice, a good practice will raise more questions than the practice. How can I put it? You do, let's say you could measure the practice by numbers of mantras, right? So I did 100,000 practices, right? Well, if they were 100,000 good practices, it gave rise to 100 million questions. No. Or that is misleading, because that looks like a splatter of stuff. It gave rise to 100 million expressions of vibrant question. To be in a state of question, to truly be in a state of question, one must be in a state of potential response that such a question could invoke. So I want you to tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. Why won't you tell me the truth? You've got to show me the truth. I want you to show me that. I mean, you'd think a person like that was an idiot. It's like absurd. They're just babbling on with crap. They say they're full of question. I really want to know the truth. But if you're not willing to hear, you're not willing to see, you're not willing to, in a sense, experience your organism being danced in a fresh way that's never danced before, in no possible way will you discover anything new. Because the newness isn't out there, the newness is in this. The whole thing is ungraspable, so we call it emptiness, but that's kind of pointless. So we might as well just call it radiant form, luminous form. Right? And so to raise that question, like how can I make this practice vibrant for me? Some days you don't have to raise that question because you do the practice and it is vibrant for you. You're just bang there. But if any of you have done extensive practice in a tradition, then I cannot conceive that you haven't had moments when it wasn't vibrantly there. There surely were moments where you lost the plot, right? How on earth could you do years of practice and every single moment was brilliantly lucid and perfect, So there's days when we lose the plot. When we lose the plot, our work is not to blame ourselves for losing the plot, to berate ourselves for losing the plot, to beat ourselves up for losing the plot, to confess to someone that we lost the plot, right? That's not our work. Our work is to look at it and go, how can I make this plot work for me? So I mean, I've given this example before, and I'll just give it again. It's a kind of a silly mechanical thing, but I think we could kind of apply it to, it could be applied to lots of things. When I first was introduced to Tibetan teachings, right, I found them extraordinarily emotionally attractive and simultaneously emotionally upsetting, right, because I didn't feel I could do them. Right, and it was like very clear to me that basically Tibetan Buddhist practice involved visualization, and I couldn't visualize. So I mean, I'm stuck in a really difficult place. I know, somehow intuitively, I know I'm in this for the long haul. And yet the long haul requires something which I can't do. Right? Rinpoche used to say to us, he said, you know, this teaching's for winners, not for losers. That sounds really gross, doesn't it? Right? Right? But I took that to heart. And I decided that this teaching was for winners, not for losers. And so, damn it, I'm not going to be a loser. Right? However, I can't visualize. Right? So one day, I was kind of working away and just holding this, and suddenly it popped into my mind a kind of an experiment that I could try. Imagine for a moment that Jan is sitting in front of me on a couch and she's just asked this question. Now, I don't find that difficult to imagine. And I open my eyes and there she is. Right? So, okay. Jan Racy's sitting on the couch, but I'm not going to look. I'm going to close my eyes. Right? And I don't mean I then started to meditate with my eyes closed, but I decided that but I can also, if you've had this experience, I hope you've had the experience somewhere in your life, everyone, right? That you can be sitting with someone very quietly, say you're not talking necessarily, and you're maybe you have your eyes closed, you're not even seeing them, and that they could very quietly get up and walk out of the room without sound, without anything, and you suddenly feel like something's changed, and you open your eyes and they're not there. You know, it's almost like you can kind of, even though I'm not seeing them, you can kind of feel the presence, like you could, right? And so I decided that what I would do is like I would meditate on a feeling that Chenrezig was present, even though I couldn't see Chenrezig. And so it's pretty good being Chenrezig, right? And guess what? It worked, so-called, right? After years of working in this dark, I actually had a few images come up of Chenrezig. How amazing, right? But in a sense, like I was determined to make. I realized there's two ways that you can win. One is that you're superb and you can play the game and you're a champion, right? But the second way is either cheat or change the rules, right? Now this is a serious meditator does this. Because the point of meditation isn't to sit here and do 100,000, I can't do it, I'm useless, I'm a failure, this is boring. You turn your rosary 100,000 times and be bored with it is not going to generate wonderment. And so this is what I mean, you have to find a way to kind of make it work for you. Right? And sometimes it takes you right out of the practice, so to speak. You know, so you know, like if you know, we're after years of working with Chenrezig, something made me sit down with the dictionary and dissect the word. And Chen is great, Ray is continuum, Zig is one of the roots to see. So, that makes sense to me. Compassion has something to do with seeing like magnanimous seeing of the continuum. Right? Like in other words, insight and the union of wisdom and compassion, the very compassion is that. Right? And so then I could start to see, well, can I see other beings, you know, that I have to interact with at work or seeing people or whatever, can I see them as great continuum seeing? They might not realize they're great continuum seeing. Right? But I find that I could train myself to see them. This is to see all beings. The light radiates out and transforms all beings into Chenrezig. Good bloody luck. You know, Chenrezig, and the bombs are falling in Gaza. Right? I'm not talking about a kind of sort of simplistic brainwashing. Right? But it has to feel meaningful. Right? Can you, like, there was a time when I was in retreat at the Dharma Center of Canada for a long time as a young monk. Nobody else was up there, and Wanchuk, who was a nun, she was up there at the same time. We were both in retreat, but we were kind of officially supposed to be available if somebody showed up at the center, but they hardly ever came, which was great. And when they did come, it was sort of like they were interrupting our practice. And a pain in the butt, you know. They'd come up and they wanted, oh, can you got a rosary I can borrow, or bring your own, can't eat food or anything, And we were busy trying to awaken for the sake of all sentient beings, and these people came in and interfered, and they interrupted our practice, And fortunately, it didn't take too long for us to kind of the penny dropped that there was a slight contradiction going on here. there was something was kind of vaguely contradictory, right? So we decided to kind of have a little gap in our practice, and we had a cup of tea together, Wanchuk and I, and we discussed this, and we realized this was just not a good state. This was not a good. The fact was they were a nuisance, and it wasn't. How are we going to deal with this? So we made a fantasy. Right? All beings are the living Buddha. And so when anyone shows up, the living Buddha has showed up at the Dharma Center. Right? Of course, we just drop, would you like some tea? Is there anything we can get you? Would you like another rosary? Or, I mean, in a sense, you're creating a kind of mental space that takes a practice. Of course, all beings are Tathagata, you know this, but can we turn it into a real thing? And can I, when the person comes up, and maybe sometimes people showed up and they were aggressive, they weren't nice, right? And I'm going, and I'm having, and I go, this is the living Buddha coming, being not nice. Now what do I do? Right? I know. I'll tell him to leave. I'll call the police. I'll take out a restraining order. Right? Or I develop patience. I develop skill in interacting in a difficult situation without taking refuge in my anger or my frustration or my petulance or my whatever it is. Right? This is Chenrezig at work. Right? You've got to put the sadhanas to work. Right? For a Westerner, I really believe this. I think if we don't do that, if we don't ask the question, what does this really mean underneath the symbology, underneath the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, right? What does it mean in terms of life? And then could I encourage that and keep that freshly in my mind in the midst of ordinary living when I've forgotten the sadhana, when I'm not bothering with the mantras, when I'm not interested even in the sadhana. The sadhana, after a while, it looks like, you've got this magnificent meal and you're just obsessed with reading the menu over and over again. I mean, it could be like that, just kind of like, at that point you just chuck the menu, eat the meal, share it with the others. I don't know if I'm able to
it's a good answer. Thank you.
Speak to this. I mean, what you're asking is very real. Like it's a absolutely. I don't mean to trivialize it. It's common. Lots of people struggle with something of this nature, but the kind of resolution of it. Oddly enough, the only resolution to samsara is love and clear seeing. We're kind of stuck, aren't we? We've got to get out of samsara to get to love and clear seeing, but we need love and clear seeing to get out of samsara. That's Escher's hands. Yeah. Was there anything coming from cyberspace, people? sitting down into the fullness of your living. By the power of these wholesome activities, may our lives be rich with awakening. Living thus, may we abandon all unwholesomeness. In the very midst of this extraordinary mystery of conception, of gestation, of birth, of childhood, of adolescence, of adulthood, of occasionally being ill, of getting better, getting ill again, getting better, and eventually descending into what's traditionally called dying. In the midst of this extraordinary mystery of being and becoming, may we help all beings to realize their true interbeing, interknowing nature. Sarvamangala. And just to be a little bit kind of traditional and whatever, which is not like me, if there's any merit arising from us gathering together, may it contribute to peace in the Middle East. Thank you all. May you be well wherever you are in the world, and hope to see you again.